Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7. It's the 25th of May, and I'm Gordon Ross. Joining me in the studio this evening is Neil Gray, MSP for Airdrie and Shotts. Welcome to the programme, Neil. How are you?
Good evening. I'm very well, thanks. How are you?
It's nice to see you here, Neil. We'll look forward to speaking to you a bit later on in the programme. Also joining me this evening is our Scotland at 7 regular contributor, Chris McCusker. Welcome back, Chris. How are you?
I'm fine, Gordon. Good evening and hello to Neil.
Okay, we'll get on with the show first of all, and of course during the show we always start with the latest figures on COVID-19. So bear with me for a moment, I'll find them for you. Okay, so the latest figures on the coronavirus are that as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 2,010,774 people in Scotland have been tested through NHS Scotland labs and the UK's government regional testing centre since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 1,778,113 have been confirmed negative. 232,661 have tested positive. There are 318 cases of COVID-19 confirmed by test, although not everyone with the virus will display the symptoms, and of course not all those with symptoms will be tested. There are 2 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by coronavirus COVID-19 infection now stands at 7,666. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 97 were in hospital last night, 6 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 a.m. this morning, 3,138,366 people have received their first dose of the COVID-19 vaccination, and 1,881,214 have received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures show that 127,739 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 15 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings and not just hospitals. Now, the Office for National Statistics update the percentage of people testing positive for COVID-19, the positivity rate, shows early signs of a potential increase in England, decreased in Scotland, and has remained low in Wales for the week ending the 15th of May 2021. The trend was uncertain in Northern Ireland. Hospital admissions in England decreased slightly, week ending the 16th of May. The number of registered deaths involving COVID-19 in England and Wales increased in the week ending the 14th of May. However, trends should be interpreted with caution as the previous week was affected by the early May bank holiday. The number of deaths that have mentioned COVID-19 on the death certificate was 151 in the week ending the 14th of May 2021. Deaths involving COVID-19 accounted for 1.5% of all deaths registered in England and Wales. The total number of deaths registered was 6.1% above the 5-year average. The trend should be interpreted with caution, as restrictions were affected by the early May bank holiday. The mortality rates due to COVID-19 decreased for the 3rd consecutive month in both England and Wales in April 2021. And also now to tonight's main news. The Social Justice and Fairness Commission report has been published. The SNP has today published the finding of its Social Justice and Fairness Commission, set up by the First Minister Nicola Sturgeon to present a route map for delivering a fairer Scotland. The findings of the report are based on the central principle that the function of government is to make life better for everyone and to ensure that no one is left behind. The Commission believes that with independence, Scotland can build on the foundations that have been laid under devolution by the Scottish Government. The report offers a conversation starter to find consensus about what kind of Scotland we want to build with independence and how best to get there. And who better to ask questions about this particular new document, but one of its authors, Neil Gray, MSP for Airdrie and Shotts. And so, Neil, this must be a very exciting time for you, being involved in the creation of this commission. What particularly in the report do you think you would like to draw viewers' attention to?
I think it's about obviously the policies about that we would see as being beneficial to the people of Scotland, about tackling the child poverty issues that are facing our nation, but also the processes that will get us to a fairer, more socially just Scotland. And it's about ensuring that we have better engagement from people in the issues and the policies that are affecting them directly. And it's about making sure that we prioritise a human rights approach and also ensure that we prioritise policies that are going to create a well-being economy. Obviously, there's a huge amount in there. It's a massive report. It draws on expertise of people like Sir Harry Burns, the former Chief Medical Officer, Angela Hagan, who is a fantastic academic as well, who's done great work with the Women's Budget Group in Scotland, and likes of Professor Mark Stevens, another renowned academic who's done fantastic work in his field too. So great input, not just from the SNP, but from people outside it as well.
I notice in the early part of this report, Neil, that one of the first things you talk about is democratic renewal and changing how we make decisions. Now, I notice that it's emphasising very heavily the word consensus. Can you explain to me what consensus means in terms of the Scottish Parliament and how it functions? How would that change if the recommendations of this report are implemented?
Well, for us, it's not just about finding consensus within the Scottish Parliament, of course, or finding consensus cross-party. It's about building consensus in the society as a whole and bringing people with us on our journey to independence and giving people the ability to inform that process and to feel part of it. Whenever there is any kind of social or political change, it's most successful when there is cross-party and social support for it. And one of the examples we give in the report is the NHS, which was, of course, founded by one party, but because of cross-party support over decades, it's now an embedded institution that is well loved, well respected, and one that we cherish and one that we could never see lost. So, building that type of social change it requires consensus and it requires people to come with us on that journey. So not just in terms of the politicians within the Scottish Parliament, but most importantly, the people of Scotland who we obviously want to see vote for independence and to be able to be part of the process of building the new nation state, the new independent nation state of Scotland.
One thing that stood out for me in the early parts of the report, Neil, was a thing called the Citizens' Assembly, which, according to the report, have enormous potential to transform decision-making in an independent Scotland at every level. How would such assemblies be set up and who would participate in them?
Well, we've already seen a citizen assembly working very well, looking to talk about Scotland's future, and that was a good example of how it could function in terms of dealing with more difficult decisions that would affect an independent Scotland. And one of the examples that we've used where it could possibly be deployed is around whether or not to decriminalise drug use. And having that kind of, really difficult decision that requires consensus and requires a safe space for considered discussion, I think a citizens' assembly would be an ideal format.
So you believe that maybe taking this kind of decision-making out of the confrontational politics of the chamber and placing it in an area which is maybe a little more neutral would be a better way of doing this?
That's part of it, providing a safer space for debate, where you don't have the normal, binary, reactionary type of debate that you might see in a political chamber. But also, it's about involving people in the decisions that are affecting them, and providing far greater involvement in the decision-making process of citizens and renewing that social contract between citizens and state.
Okay, thank you, Neil. I'm not sure, Chris, if you have had a chance to read much of this enormous document. It does run to well over 100 pages. But one of the other things I think, Chris, that might have interested you from this is the human rights and equality that are being built into this plan. Agreeing, defining and enshrining our shared values and goals, and having a written constitution. Do you think that would be a valuable thing to have, Chris, a written constitution which outlines everybody's rights and responsibilities?
Without a doubt, yeah. And I really like the way that it's been laid out into a, for me, what you would call a 5 point bullet plan. The whole caring society, which would then take in the likes of the tackling of drug issues and social care, which is a body of work that obviously is going to be garnered from quite a few MSPs' input. The likes of Angela Constance and Humza Yusuf. So I mean, that in itself is just one huge, big body of work to get undertaken. But again, even delving into the well-being economy, the trade union group have been doing a lot of work, with regards to just transition. As we move into utilising more green renewable energy, so I mean, having this as a baseline to outline what Scotland could possibly look like in an independent Scotland, or should I actually say an independent Republic of Scotland? That's my own preference, but that's neither here nor there. But it does go a long way to re-engaging with people in incremental sort of like small sections, where you can carve up things, and discuss them as individual items. Yep. Before you actually come to achieving the main goal.
Okay, Chris, thank you for that. Neil, if I could come back to you, one of the other interesting topics which is discussed in Section 5 of this report is investing in childhood and poverty reduction measures, public health measures. Were you disappointed when the United Kingdom government kind of vetoed the idea of the Scottish government accepting the rights of the child, the United Nations Human Rights for Children, in a recent piece of legislation? Did that come as a surprise to you?
Yes, actually it did, even though I shouldn't be surprised at the actions of this Tory UK government. It did surprise me. It made the case for Scottish independence better than I could, quite frankly, because it says, when the Scottish Parliament has unanimously passed a piece of legislation to enshrine and protect the rights of children into Scots law, a UK government can come along and try to stop that from happening. And almost a devolution veto over the rights of children, I found incredible, actually. And we talk quite a lot about what I would call preventative spending or early intervention to ensure that we are tackling the issue of poverty. It's about investing in people in society and ensuring that, as I say, the social contract between people and state is renewed, so that it's about an involvement in decision-making process, but also the economy working better for people. Chris rightly talked there about the well-being economy, and we very much have that as a thread running right the way through the report, that we wish to see a well-being bill brought forward by the Scottish Parliament to ensure that every decision that is taken has well-being grounded in all policy making, all decisions that are taken, to ensure that we have that front and centre of all decision making going forward.
Neil, we've heard recently, in fact, just after the Scottish government was picked and put in place, of a new piece of legislation on the National Care Service for Scotland. This was an election manifesto promise of the SNP. How important is a national body for the caring profession in Scotland? Why is it so important?
It's hugely important because it brings standards up across Scotland in terms of the service that those that are in receipt of social care can expect, but it also brings standards up in terms of those who work in the National Care Service that we're wanting to create, and ensures that the care sector is an attractive proposition for people who are wanting to go into it as a career, and ensures that we are bringing the care system on par with the National Health Service to ensure that, again, as I say, that the focus and attention is given to ensure that we're giving the very best to people who need and require, have a dependence on social care, and also those who work in it, that are fully valued and properly supported in their profession.
Okay, thank you, Neil. Chris, over to you in your trades union hat here. One of the other things I notice about the idea of this national care organisation is that it also brings opportunities to improve and standardise pay and conditions. Now, this I read as possibly being the unionisation of the care industry. Is that something you would welcome?
Without a shadow of a doubt, I would welcome that. But again, I have a personal interest in this myself, being an unpaid carer, and I might be viewed as a kind of like an also ran, with regards to this report. But once this is established, then hopefully the Holyrood would be able to have a look at the actual rights and benefits of the unpaid carers, many of whom have actually given up careers in order to do their role as an unpaid carer, because of quite simply the fact that the level of carers that are available within the social care structure as it is just now is not at the capacity that would allow unpaid carers to sort of like step away from their caring roles. But with regards pay and conditions and all the rest of it, the trade union group have long argued, quite rightly, that the living wage should always be maintained as a base starting point. And there's many groups in Scotland, the likes of Scottish Labour, the SSP, they're all going from £13 and £15 upward, and and they all want it tomorrow. But you have to start from a baseline, and obviously not starting from the baseline of the UK national minimum wage, which is about £8.30 odd or something like that. Yeah. You're actually setting the bar higher than what it is, currently is at this moment in time. Okay. So going forward, as long as those wages rise in accordance with inflation, then I think it's a great way to start.
Okay. All right, thank you very much, Chris. Before we leave this subject, Neil, one of the other things I think which stands out in this report is migration to Scotland, the idea of creating a country which actually wants people to migrate here. I notice one of the headlines here is to create conditions to encourage migration to Scotland and to benefit Scottish communities who are struggling with declining ageing populations, restoring free movement. Now, Scotland is obviously suffering greatly at the moment, and we have seen the effects of the British government's hostile environment. This would seem like an almost complete reversal of that. Would it be right?
We want to create an immigration system that works for Scotland, and clearly we are a nation that needs people to come here to live, to work, to contribute to our society. And so the current hostile environment that we can see in evidence on Kenmure Street in Glasgow is one that just does not work for us as a nation economically, also socially and morally. We've seen the outcry that has come as a result of the dawn raids and the enforced evictions that thankfully we're hopefully going to see the back of, at least for a period during the pandemic, thanks to the court ruling today. Yeah. But Scotland can do better than this. We can create a system that is welcoming, that is tolerant, that is open, to ensure that we get a system that works for society and businesses, employers across the country, to ensure that we get access to the talent that we need in order to flourish as a nation.
Okay, Neil. Listen, unfortunately, we've run out of time on this subject, but your last comments lead rather neatly to our next story, which is that the Home Office has dropped plans to evict thousands of migrants during the pandemic. The Home Office has reversed its plan to evict thousands of migrants during the pandemic, according to reports today. The U-turn affects about 4,000 migrants who were facing eviction from Home Office accommodation. Concerns were raised that the department's plan to resume evictions of some refused asylum seekers with immediate effect could increase the speed of COVID and discriminate against people of colour, who will be disproportionately affected by the policy. A court order signed on Tuesday by the government's lawyers and counterparts challenging the evictions policy confirmed that the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, had withdrawn it. The government's lawyers stated that last night in a letter that Patel had agreed to have regards to advice provided by Public Health England, PHE, when deciding about how and when to resume eviction decisions, and the Home Office would review its current equality impact assessment relating to its evictions policy. The legal challenge that led to the U-turn focused on the adequacy of the government's consultation with Public Health England and on the Home Secretary's assessment of the impact of the evictions on the communities of colour, which have suffered most from the pandemic. Neil, if I could turn to you first of all, you mentioned earlier on this particular piece of very unpopular decision by the Tory government has at least temporarily been withdrawn. But this just seems like a lull in the war at the moment between the United Kingdom and anybody who's seeking asylum here. Is it just a lull, or are they going to get straight back to it?
Certainly at the moment it appears that way, but I know that my colleagues in Westminster, led by our immigration spokesperson, our Shadow Home Secretary, Stuart McDonald from Cumbernauld, will be challenging it as far as they can. I think it says everything about this UK government that it took a claim coming to court before they would actually reconsider such a ridiculous policy of trying to force evictions during a pandemic, and they hadn't even had the appropriate consultation process with the public health authorities. But what also speaks volumes and really goes to the heart of the poor judgment, I would say at the very least, of this UK government is the sight of Priti Patel sitting watching over forced evictions taking place, wearing some line of duty type outfit, with Home Secretary written all over it, as if she was some kind of overseeing enforcement officer. I think really smacks of the dog whistle reactionary right-wing politics that we're getting from this Tory government that we should have nothing more to do with.
Okay, Neil, very briefly, Chris, what do you have to say on this subject? Do you think the British government is just going to have a rest from these evictions for a little while and then it'll be business as usual?
Well, yeah, I'm very conscious of the fact that obviously I'm on with an elected member of Parliament, so I'll keep my own thoughts with regards to Priti Patel. I think regular viewers know exactly what they are. It is not even what you would call a U-turn. It's just the fact that she is giving regard to, somebody else's findings. That just means that she's going to drop it for a number of weeks and then, pick it up when the time is right, at a time that suits her. She's a horrible character. She's a horrible human being. I really struggle to think of anybody more detestable in my political engagement, 40 years. Really, really just horrible. But the one thing, I'll just pick up what Neil was saying as well, is the wearing of the jacket.
Yes.
We also seen that Boris Johnson was wearing a similar type jacket as worn by past US presidents.
With his name,
Had the
Prime
wee
Minister
badge on. Yeah, and it's like, where are we going with that? Where are we going with that? It really, really beggars belief.
Okay. Well, Chris Sadler, we'll need to leave that subject for the moment and move on. And we're moving this time to Belarus. Airlines have rerouted to avoid Belarus. Airlines have rerouted flights to avoid Belarus's airspace, and Belarusian planes faced a possible ban from Europe as international outrage mounted over Minsk forcing down a jetliner and arresting a dissident journalist on board. A video released yesterday evening showed Roman Protasevich, who was pulled off the Ryanair flight from Greece to Lithuania in the Belarus capital on Sunday, confessing to have organised anti-government demonstrations. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel said the video was concerning and described the forced landing for the passenger jet as an unprecedented and unacceptable act. Her foreign minister, Heiko Maas, said that the Belarusian president, Alexander Lukashenko, must pay a bitter price for detaining Protasevich. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg called the incident state hijacking, and France and Ireland have described it as piracy. In response to Minsk's actions, the European Air Traffic Control Agency, Eurocontrol, recommended that EU and British carriers that overfly Belarus should reroute via the Baltic states. Neil Gray, this is a remarkable turn of events. It seems that Lukashenko is desperately trying to prove to his political enemies that they're not beyond his reach, even when they're in an aeroplane flying to somewhere else. But this is aerial piracy, surely.
Yes, it is. And very pleased to see universal condemnation across Western nations. Very pleased to see the statement, the response to the urgent question that we had in the House of Commons from our Foreign Affairs spokesperson at Westminster, Alan Smith, earlier on today, and the call on the UK government to really start putting pressure on Belarus in this regard. They are ostracising themselves from the Western world at the moment. Lukashenko really is entrenching himself into this dictatorship style way of handling matters, and getting himself rather cozy with Vladimir Putin. And it seems that the friendship and camaraderie between those two nations speaks volumes. A horrendous act of aerial piracy, a really detestable and horrendous abuse of human rights, and I think the sanctions that we've seen coming from the European Union, from the Council today, I think are absolutely right, and more power to their elbow. Keep the pressure on to see an end to this nonsense.
Well, let's hope it does end soon. Chris, one of the Russian state broadcasters, in fact, one of their media outlets, which is usually very neutral about Lukashenko, actually described him today as thuggish. And that was coming from a Russian source. Very unusual, isn't it, for Russian media to criticise somebody like Lukashenko, who's supposedly an ally?
Yeah, well, I think they'll probably get slapped down shortly because, as Neil alluded to, Putin is really enjoying this, and I probably think that Lukashenko is enjoying it as well, because he wants to disengage from the Western world, and it suits Putin to just sort of like encompass Belarus into the Russian doctorate. And it's basically probably a plaything for him at this moment in time. But from my experience, obviously working in the airlines, I was really glad to see that airlines such as Air France, Finnair, and Singapore Airlines have all said that they are going to suspend all flights over Belarusian airspace, and that'll definitely hit them economically more than anything, because if there's only two ways to go between Belarus and Moscow, then
Okay. That's an interesting observation, Chris. Another kind of effective form of sanction. Anyway, unfortunately, we have to move on. And Muslims have called the Tory party Islamophobia report a whitewash. A long-awaited review into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party has been condemned as a whitewash by Muslim Tories, despite its criticism of the language used by Boris Johnson and the mayoral campaign run by Zach Goldsmith for being insensitive to Muslim communities. The Prime Minister's comments, in which he compared women wearing the burqa to letterboxes, were singled out in the review headed by Professor Swaran Singh. The inquiry found that anti-Muslim sentiment was still present at local association and individual levels, that claims of institutional racism were not borne out by the evidence of the way the complaints had been handled. Senior Muslim figures within the party said that the review was inadequate and failed to address the deep prejudices in the party. Sajid Karim, who was a Tory MEP for more than a decade and chaired the European Parliament's working group on Islamophobia, said, "The manner in which this inquiry has been conducted means it's nothing but an attempt to whitewash deep-rooted issues out of sight." Now, Neil, this is one of those reports which has, I think, perhaps the most ironically, it's the most ironic title of a report I've seen for a long while. A whitewash. Is it a whitewash?
Certainly, I find it incredible that they're looking purely at the processes of the Conservative Party, when actually you have to look no further than the leadership for the type of terrible statements and terrible attitudes and prejudices towards Muslims in the form of Boris Johnson. You know, we've seen his horrible, not just insensitive, but incendiary language towards Muslim women, calling them, people wearing the burqa, looking like letterboxes. Just horrible. And unless they root out those type of people who are leading the party, and it does go back as well to previous leadership as well, because what we're talking about, what you're describing there in terms of Zach Goldsmith's London mayoral campaign against Sadiq Khan, the Prime Minister at the time, it was David Cameron, and I remember distinctly being sat in Prime Minister's questions, listening to some of the stuff that he was having to say, and it was disgusting. So it needs rooted out, it needs sorted out in the same way that the anti-Semitism in the Labour Party needs to be properly addressed, and it's something that has to be challenged by all parties, because we cannot stand by and allow bigotry to continue.
Thank you very much, Neil. Chris, I heard Boris Johnson responding to these charges that he was being racist in calling women wearing the burqa like letterboxes, but his defence was that he had to use such language when he was writing for the newspaper, and that somehow or other that made it okay. Is it okay?
It certainly isn't. And to try and claim that you've got journalistic licence and and describing how certain sections of the community dress, and it's just absolutely shocking. It harks back to the days where shows like Some Like It Hot, some Like It Hot, or something like that. That thing that was set in India back in the days of the Raj. With Windsor Davis.
Eight and a half hot mum.
Eight and a half hot mum. So programs like that are not suitable now. So why should such language be suitable now? But what really bugs me, or what I really can't get my head round, is the fact that with all this going on, why do so many of the Asian community buy into the Tory party manifesto and the Tory dream of Mother Britain and and all the rest of it? If they look back in their history, the days gone by of the Empire and the Raj, the British Empire didn't do an awful lot for the likes of India and Pakistan. When we look at the days of partition, it's just something that really, I just can't understand for the life of me why the Asian community actually sign up to the Tory party.
Well, Chris, I'm sorry to have to stop you there. It'll have to remain a mystery for the moment as we move on to our next story. This time it's Scottish renewables, and the sector has been damaged by Westminster policies. New research published today shows that Britain's energy regulators are putting billions of pounds of green infrastructure investment at risk by overseeing an energy market which favours EU energy imports at the expense of homegrown schemes. Electricity generators in the UK pay transmission charges for the cost of building and maintaining the network, set by the regulator Ofgem and ultimately paid by consumers as a part of their bills. The new analysis by RIDG, Renewable Infrastructure Development Group, a member company of Renewable UK, highlights the stark anomalies in how electricity generators across the Great Britain market, with operators in Germany, France and the Netherlands, able to export energy significantly cheaper than projects in the UK because they pay very low transmission charges or none at all. As a result, the UK risks becoming a net importer of renewable energy in the decades ahead, despite having the best wind energy resource in Europe, which should, with the right regulations in place, be used to drive export-led growth. Although the Prime Minister is focused on levelling up economic opportunities for all parts of the country in a green industrial revolution, this analysis shows how Ofgem is overseeing a system which favours investment in the south of England and the EU. The analysis shows that, on average, EU generators pay basically 46 pence per megawatt hour in transmission system charges, while Scotland, the average this year is £6.42 per megawatt hour. Move to the windy north of Scotland and the price spikes to £7.36, with prices forecast to rise still further. And here you can see on our graphic just how expensive Scotland is. It shows up as a great big red island, which is unable to compete with the European market. Neil Gray, looking at this graphic that we have in front of us, what do you say? Why is it that Ofgem is pricing Scottish renewables out of the market? Is this political?
They just haven't got their priorities right. They haven't got a good business sense. You look at that map and you can see quite clearly, as you said, the windy north. The majority of the wind capacity and the rest of the renewables capacity, because of course there is tidal and wave generation projects ongoing. The majority of the renewable capacity is in that red zone that we can see in that map. And yet it is the most expensive to connect to the grid. So not only is our renewable sector at a competitive disadvantage to the rest of the UK, as is evidenced there, but also our capacity to be able to make this an economic opportunity for Scotland to export to the rest of the EU is also being put at risk because of this bad business sense and really poor political decision-making in Whitehall and by government departments and agencies like Ofgem. They have to have a rethink very quickly or allow us to take our decisions ourselves so that we can make the best of the situation and the resources that we have on our doorstep that can really be put to good use for our people.
Hi, thank you, Neil. Chris, it almost looks as if Ofgem, and by extension, I suppose, the UK government, is deliberately pricing Scottish renewables out of the British market in favour of the EU. Why on earth would the British government and Ofgem decide to do such a thing?
Well, again, I think it's, specifically done to marginalise Scotland, and the further attempt just to keep the boot on top of Scotland's throat, by the British Empire. I mean, this isn't a new story. This was highlighted about 6 years ago by Gordon McIntyre Kemp. If you go onto his website, Business for Scotland.
Yeah, Business for Scotland. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, he was talking about the way that the Westminster wasn't allowing us to develop, as Neil says, in a devolved capacity that we could actually export what is naturally ours. Because what Westminster are sort of like waking up to the fact that they're not in control in this the way that they were in control of the oil and gas sector. where the
So you
pillage
think,
plummeted and
Chris, do you think then,
raped Scotland for 30 odd years.
Chris, do you think then that the United Kingdom, acting through Ofgem, is using Ofgem as a means of shutting off the flow of energy from Scotland to the rest of the UK by pricing it out of the market? Specifically when Westminster legislated so that there would be a reduction in the funding for onshore wind, which drove it offshore, and then they put the price of connection for offshore wind up, which means that now everybody wants to build wind turbines onshore again. They seem to be tying Scotland in a knot here.
Well, it's not only that as well. We have to take into consideration the fact that the Tories are very much in favour of even more exploration of fossil fuel.
And it appears nuclear energy as well, Chris.
Yeah. But that's disregarding the fact that back in 2014 they said it was going to dry up within 2 years, and yet there's still new findings pretty much every month. So I mean, it's definitely Westminster, keeping Scotland down. Because I mean, it's not a secret the fact that the amount of wind and stuff like that Scotland actually produces, as well as the effects of tidal wave, and the amount of money that the Scottish Government have put into R&D, in that sector, is actually in comparison to Westminster is absolutely shocking. No. The Scottish Government, should I say, have actually finally realised what the potential of this energy is. Yeah. And the way forward to using it has been hampered, obviously, because it is a reserve matter. Okay, well, Chris, we'll have to leave that subject there, I'm afraid. The EECHR has ruled that GCHQ's mass data interception violated the right to privacy. The UK spy agency GCHQ's methods for bulk interception of online communications violated the right to privacy, and the regime for the collection of data was unlawful. The Grand Chamber of the European Court of Human Rights has ruled. In what was described as a landmark victory for liberty, one of the applicants, the judges also found the bulk interception regime breached the right to freedom of expression and contained insufficient protections for confidential journalistic material. It said that the decision to operate a bulk interception regime did not of itself violate European Convention on Human Rights. The Chamber, the ultimate court in the ECHR, also concluded that GCHQ's regime for sharing sensitive digital intelligence with foreign governments was not illegal. The Grand Chamber judgment is a culmination of a legal challenge to GCHQ's bulk interception of online communications, begun in 2013 by Big Brother Watch and others, after Edward Snowden's whistleblowing revelations concerning the interception, processing and storing of data about millions of people's private communications by the eavesdropping agency. The case concerned the interception regime previously operated by GCHQ, which was replaced in 2016 by the Investigatory Powers Act, the IPA. Neil, let me turn to you first of all. This seems to be a terrific victory for freedom of expression, whereas the European Court of Human Rights didn't quite go as far as to say that the entire regime was illegal. Certainly the bulk collection of data, that part of it, does seem to have breached human rights. Is this, do you think, going to have a major effect on the security services and their collection of people's personal data?
I would certainly hope so. Obviously, we want to make sure that the agencies that are supposed to be there to protect us, to ensure that they are intercepting, potentially terrorist activity, for instance, which would be a legitimate use of their powers, is not being abused. And it's about making sure that that balance is got right, and it's a balance between ensuring that while our freedoms are in that regard are being restricted, they are been done so to ensure our greater freedoms aren't by terrorist organisations or other state actors that are looking to cause us harm. So I certainly do hope that this is taken very seriously, and again, I would hope that this is something that can be pursued by my colleagues at Westminster to ensure that the court ruling from the European Court of Human Rights is upheld and is followed and listened to.
Okay, thank you for that. Neil, sorry. Chris, after Snowden's revelations, I mean, obviously Edward Snowden blew the whistle on the mass acquisition of personal data and what it revealed, particularly from the American military's point of view. Would you say that GCHQ has been overly intrusive in its collection of data in this way? Because it seems to have been casting a very wide net and sweeping up millions of innocent people's data transmissions, their messages and so forth.
Well, yeah, I think there has been a certain element of that. And, what I was wanting to emphasise is the fact that, as Neil said, data harvesting used in the right proportionality, which is going to benefit, society as a whole, without being as intrusive as, knowing the fact that you had fish fingers for dinner and stuff like that. Yep. Then, that is all very, very well and good. But when it starts to cross that line, where it's used for political gain or for, journalistic tidbits or, sensationalism or, things like that. Which go beyond the realms of what would you say, the need of the public's knowledge. That something has to be drawn back on it. And again, this is just potentially something that was not considered when Britain voted for Brexit, because when you have the protection of the adults in the room, such as the EU, then these things would have been dealt with far, far quicker under their auspices, rather than, as Neil will probably testify to, the way that it runs through Westminster. Where it goes into one committee and then it comes out and goes into another committee, and then before you know it, it's a shadow of its former self. Of completely no use to man the beast. So I mean, if it's acted upon, then fine, fair and well. But I have my reservations about the way that the Tories vote. Also, you have to take into consideration the majority that they hold within Westminster.
Oh, Chris, I'm going to have to stop you there. We're getting a bit close for time. So moving on to our next report now, and a report which shows mistrust of the UK government's disability benefit assessment process. A new report by Z2K has shown a huge percentage do not trust the UK government's disability benefit assessment process, or believe that their lived experiences will be taken into consideration in the upcoming Health and Disability Green Paper. Commenting, the SNP's disability spokesperson, Marion Fellows MP, said that the Tory government had been failing claimants with disabilities or long-term health conditions in Scotland and the rest of the UK for years, from refusing to increase legacy benefits in line with universal credit, to the Work and Pensions Secretary ignoring the higher costs that they have faced throughout the pandemic. She said that the Tories promised this Green Paper years ago and have delayed much-needed reforms to disability assessments. Ms Fellows called on the UK government to publish it now without delay, given the findings of this report. While the Tories at Westminster plough ahead with callous policies based on nothing more than ideology, the SNP Scottish Government has set out plans to use our existing powers to make life better for disabled people in Scotland under a social security system based on fairness, dignity and respect, said the SNP MP for Motherwell and Wishaw, adding that as long as the majority of welfare and employment powers remain reserved to Westminster, the Scottish Government will always be trying to build a fairer society with one hand tied behind its back. That's why Scotland's future must be in Scotland's hands. Now, Neil, it can be no surprise to you that this kind of report has laid bare the way in which the British government has allegedly seems to have abandoned disabled people and their needs and just kind of swept them aside out of the way.
No, absolutely. I was on the front benches responding to the Welfare Reform and Work Bill, now the Welfare Reform and Work Act, in 2016 that brought about the end of the employment support allowance benefit support for the work-related activity component. And when that was stripped away, that £30 a week was stripped away, we were promised then, 5 years ago, that there would be this health and work green paper that would replace the work-related activity component of employment support allowance. But that has taken over 5 years now. It's still not come. And now we're seeing reports, which I'm not surprised to read at all, from the likes of Z2K, fantastic campaigning organisation, and so many others, that say that the UK social security system is broken and that people are being failed, particularly those with disabilities and long-term health conditions. Marion is absolutely right to point to the fact that during the pandemic, while universal credit was rightly uprated, and there's a challenge now to ensure that uprating, that £20 a week, is maintained, legacy benefits, which is disproportionately claimed by people with disabilities and long-term health conditions, was not. They were left behind. And this report shows that the disability benefits assessment process is lacking in trust by people who actually use it. So there is a need by the UK government, if it's serious, to tackle this lack of confidence for root and branch changes. And if they're unwilling to do that, then devolve the whole lot. Let us get on with it and do it ourselves.
Well, great sentiments indeed, Neil. Briefly, Chris, if you would, obviously you would believe very strongly in the idea of increasing benefits to carers, because I know that you are a carer yourself. How do you think a independent Scottish government could do this differently had we had our independence already?
Well, basically, first of all, to reverse the cuts, that's standard, and again, it could all be wonderfully sorted out with UBI, but that's neither here nor there. That's a whole different subject, which obviously we don't have time for tonight. But since that, Marion again has been a great champion on this issue, as have many of the MPs down in Westminster. But this has actually been going on since 2013, and ever since the people that were on DLA have transovered to PIP. Some of the people that were on legacy are still to transcend over. And this leads back to what I was talking about earlier on, is the fact that it takes an extremely large amount of time for Westminster to get its finger out, in order for things to get done. And this is one case. This is one point in case where the Tories have got absolutely no empathy whatsoever with regards people with disabilities or the carers that are actually looking after them. Okay, but Scotland can do a hell of a lot better with its own system.
Okay, Chris, thank you for that. Okay. Our final story this evening, some good news for a change, and £3.75 million is being allocated to improve rural connectivity. Mobile coverage in some of the most rural parts of Scotland will be improved with an additional £3.75 million investment. A further 9 masts are earmarked for the Scottish Borders, the Highlands, Angus and Island communities, along with 3 to replace masts removed earlier this year. Marking the latest phase of the Scottish 4G infill infrastructure programme, the masts will provide more rural homes and businesses with 4G mobile connectivity for the first time. It takes total funding package for the programme being delivered by WHP Telecoms to £28.75 million. Neil Gray, this is a bit of good news for many rural communities who have long suffered, haven't they, from a lack of decent mobile phone connectivity. But how important is mobile phone connectivity if you live in a rural community?
Well, I'm originally from Orkney. My family still live there, and the struggle to get connected to mobile internet is a real problem. It's an issue for people who maybe can't get access to a decent broadband link because the rollout hasn't reached their area yet. And businesses in rural and remote areas that are looking to be able to trade. It's also clearly an issue for those who are looking to stay connected with what's going on, and more of society is moving online. So I'm really welcome this news. It shows that this is a Scottish government that is delivering for all of Scotland and is a Scottish government for all of Scotland. So really pleased with this announcement today from Kate Forbes, and looking forward to that investment coming to fruition and seeing these new masts go up.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil. Chris, and it's going to be very brief, I'm afraid. What's your reaction to this? More new connectivity for our rural communities. It must be a good thing, especially for those who are more isolated or living alone.
Well, definitely, and moreover, going forward, where we're having to have conversations such as this, where we can't be in the studio, then people are using their pherophones in order to work remotely. But going forward again, it's an investment from the Scottish Government, which has been undermatched by the UK government, as far as I can tell. For what is actually a reserved matter, the Scottish Government are actually leading on the front foot for this. And that's obviously, because they are prioritising the Scottish people. Okay. But again, going forward, establishing this as obviously helping to connect, remote communities up. It's obviously going to provide a platform for jobs. We didn't have time to touch on earlier on the fact that Scotland's migration depends on people working in the hotel and catering industry. And throughout this pandemic, Scotland's not been able to recruit as much people, because of the fact that it is not an attractive proposition to be working in a hotel, up in the middle of nowhere, and you've got no broadband connection or no way to sell your business. Okay. So, it has to be welcomed, of course.
Okay, Chris, thank you for that. Well, we're just about run out of time this evening, but before I leave you, I just wanted to remind our viewers that, of course, we're still in the middle of our crowdfunder at the moment. So if you like what we do here on Broadcasting Scotland and you want us to do more of it, you can help by becoming a regular contributor. You can become a supporter, I beg your pardon, at £5 a month, make an individual donation, or you could even volunteer. But all that remains for me to say to you is to say thank you, first of all, to Neil Gray, MP, for being our guest this evening. MSP, I beg your pardon, Neil, and also our regular contributor, Chris McCusker. So from the three of us and all of us here at the studio tonight, a very good evening to you.